Hello and welcome to this special presentation on Times Now. The budget this year is going to be extremely important. It doesn't matter where you are in the country or where you are at life. This budget perhaps might just define the next couple of years of your life. Now, we are in Bennett University in the National Capital Region, and with me right now is Professor Nilanjan Banik, who is a professor of economics, and the young, bright students of Bennett University. Give yourselves a huge round of applause. Thank you for participating here. Now, the purpose of this program is to find out what young India wants from this budget. How does young India perceive the budget 2020, what they want in it, what they feel should be in it, and what they seem to think about the challenges facing Nirmala Sitharaman, our finance minister. Before I go to the students, however, I would like to start the show with Professor Banik, if I could. Professor Banik, this particular budget has assumed significance in ways more than one. Particularly because our economy is in a downslide. It's not really good news on the economic front. The government's trying really hard, but they have an uphill, onerous task. To you, what is an ideal budget? I wouldn't say good or bad, because depending on who you speak to, could be different yardsticks. But what is an ideal budget going into 2020s?
See, in a way, budget is no different than how we manage our family. I'll just give you an instance. Like, we have our own income, and we prioritize our spending based on the requirement. The similar thing is we are going to see about the budget. The government has fixed pot of money and something they actually earn from taxes, and they have to prioritize their spending on various activities, for instance, health, education, or for rural sector. Now, I'll tell you why this budget is important for some reason, and these are the known facts. For the first time in last 4 decades, we have had scenario where the consumption expenditure is falling. Now, what does that mean? If you look into our society, one of the perception is inequality is growing. Now, we have close to 500 million farmers in India. Now, out of these 500 million farmers, almost 85% of the farmers belongs to the small and medium categories with less than 2 hectares of land holdings. Now, one of the reason what has been talked about in the press is maybe because of demonetization, this farming sector and the small and medium scale industry got hurt. And because of that, what we are seeing has happened over the last 4 decades, which is a fall in consumption expenditure. So therefore, the first thing I should expect from the finance minister is there any way we can actually boost up this consumption expenditure? Because without that, again, you might have heard that the latest growth figure for our GDP is around 5%. You know, that is
4.5.
4.5 is the least in the last 11 years. You know. And consumption expenditure being the largest component of GDP, it explains close to around 60% of the GDP. My idea is we should find a way how to increase the consumption expenditure.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned consumption here, because we understand, and any economist you speak to, and I speak to a lot of them, suggest that the reason why the government hasn't really been able to tackle the problems on their plate right now is because they want to drive growth, but they're not looking really at the reason why, which is lack of demand. Lack of private investment in private sector as well. Do you think the government has done enough?
We are having apparel industry, which is also happened to be one of our largest exporting sector. Now, if you look into the size of the apparel industry in India, it's close to $120 billion, yes, which is almost same to the size of the Reliance industry. Now, this apparel industry employs 40 million of workers, right? Now, the problem with, I was looking at one of the news items, which says that the problem with the apparel industry is they are not getting their GST input, which they have filed, you know, from the
problematic
government.
GST.
Yes, yes. And because of that, what happens is we are not getting competitive in the world market. And our apparel export shares is being eaten up by countries like Bangladesh, Vietnam, and so on and so forth.
Bangladesh is a success story.
It is a success story.
Around, yeah.
And that is a problem, because my idea is, if you look into this GST, had government was in a position to give back this input credit on GST, we could have been price competitive by as much as 7%, which is a big thing, you know. But unfortunately, I don't know, the government may not have that money because the economy is not doing, and corporate tax is a source of earning for the government. And because the corporate tax is also not getting there, again, we are talking yesterday, you know, for the first time, the imports started falling. You know, if you're looking into the items such as electronic items or steel, there is a clear indication that the import is falling because our industry is not doing well. or maybe because there is an excess capacity in our industry, you know. So the need of the hour is try to fix this problem, you know, somehow ensure that there is money in the hand of the rural people, because that is like 500 million of 1.25 billion population.
I want to talk about, demand-driven answers really in just a bit. And I also want to go into the students as well.
Right.
But before I do that, I also quickly want to touch upon what we look at every year in the budget, which is, of course, whether the government is going to maintain the fiscal deficit targets, what is the CAD looking like as well, and what is the government's revenue target, all that. Do you think this time around the government perhaps, I think last year the target was about 3.3 or 3.4,
Right.
and the government did overshoot it. Do you think this time around it's going to be the same? How much is that going to affect really as we go forward?
I wish they overshoot it for the simple reason, you need to put some more money for schemes such as Narega, you know, because this is the bulk of where the rural people are working, and you need to give money in the hand of the rural people. You need to put more money in the PM Kisan, although they have now I think 75,000 crore they have allocated, but half of the money they could not disburse because the Aadhaar card of the farmers are not linked to their bank account, you know. And I also gave you that instance of the small and medium enterprises, they're not getting input credit tax. You know, so what this tells you, if industry is dying, at the end of the day, I'm not going to hire the people. And again, the latest data show that there are around 25 million people without job out of, again, 500 million odd labor force, you know.
Which gives me the perfect segue, because we have young students